So what do I want? What do you want from a dungeon crawler? When I look at the various titles in my board gaming collection, the primary focus, and it's not surprising, would be dungeon crawlers. Certainly it's the Dungeons and Dragons influence, but there's also some wargaming influence in terms of the miniatures. And just when I think, well, my collection is good. Fellow board gamers, you know this. Your collection is good. Your titles are excellent. But then you check out a new title. You see that YouTube review. And next thing you know, you're exploring or jumping into a brand new system. But out of all the dungeon crawlers that I own, there are certain elements across all of them that excite me. And if I had to build the ultimate dungeon crawler, or this is a question like, this is the game you're going to play for the next year, just this game, what would that title be? And of course, my player personality feeds into that. Your player personality might be a little bit different. Jumping in, the first thing that I want in a dungeon crawler. Now, first thing, absolutely artwork, components. At this point, miniatures, absolutely. Diverse miniatures, meaning I don't want like 50 orcs and like one orc leader. Yes, there's going to be minions, whatever the theme of the dungeon is going to be, orcs or goblins or skeletons. I also, of course, want some boss monsters, lieutenants, whatever we're going to call it, preferably a dragon. But I also would want some kind of unique monsters, whether that's to that gaming system or certainly in the world. There's a lot of diversity if we're pulling generic Dungeons and Dragons or fantasy monsters. It would be kind of nice to have that diversity of 3 or 4 different things I might not see elsewhere. So components, artwork, miniatures, absolutely a given. Jumping in, the thing that is most important to me, and Euro gamers are already like cringing at this statement even before I make it, random. I want this element of random. Now, let's say, just to kind of frame it, on one side of the random, controllable random. We see this in Dungeons and Dragons. I'm going to roll a d20 to hit. I'm going to roll for damage. I control that random by advantage. I control that random through feat. I can influence it through bonuses to hit, magic items, buffs. So in something like Dungeons and Dragons, yes, it's random, but at this point, really, you can control it and get any outcome you want. So in terms of board games, we have dice-based mechanics, but there's ways to control it, to get rerolls, to influence it, to optimize it, to meta it, to math hammer it. That's on one side. On the opposite side would be just pretty much any Games Workshop dungeon crawler, present, past, and future, where just there's so much random throwing at you. You not only can't control it, it becomes a bookkeeping nightmare where you're like, what's the point of playing this game? Because all this crazy stuff is hitting me. It has nothing to even do with the theme of the game. I mean, it's trying, but it's basically to cover up poor rules design. Side question, can you have random and good rules design? I want random somewhere in the middle. I like rolling dice. I want to have some way to influence or control the dice, but at a cost, spend some stamina, spend some action points, use a once dungeon ability to do that. I don't want everything to be free all the time. I like random dungeon layout. I like random populations in the dungeon. I like event cards. I want the story to be a little bit different every single time. Now, the trade-off to this is very much player personality. I'm going to be playing these games a lot. I'm going to be investing in it throughout my, can we call it a career of a wargamer. I've won many games. I've lost many games. The need to win is there. The competitive nature is there. But to be entertained, like my hero Maximus, that is the most important thing when you're in the arena. So it's more important to me to have some random stuff happen and try to go up against that and try to win that dungeon than to have 100% in control. Because at that point, I feel like I might as well be just watching a movie. I do realize you can get into some situations. We see this with Zombie Side, Black Plague, and Modern, where Invader fixes it a little bit, where you spawn cards and like turn 1, turn 2, turn 3 early game, you could spawn an abomination. That's like a super powerful undead that is very hard to kill outside of a specific situation. So it is possible your level 1 adventurers, you go in dungeon spawns and it just hits you with this crazy combination. Okay, well, it's a dungeon. I'm going in there to raid stuff, to steal stuff, to do a quest. Like, that's how it rolls out. Let's do it. I mean, that's the wargamer in me. Let's figure it out and let's try to do it. And if it's not possible, then, today is a good day to die. So I want that random. Second to this, I was going to say campaign play, but it's more like I want progression. And what I mean by that is I want to gain treasure, I want to gain items, and I want to gain magic abilities, character abilities. I want to make progress both inside the dungeon and outside the dungeon. And this is ideal. And I realize in saying this creates some balance issues. I'd like to find some loot that I could use right away. A power potion, a healing potion, a buff. Something that in this dungeon, if I so choose, I can utilize to give myself a boost. That makes me feel like I'm making some progress, in addition to finding gold and treasure, coins, gems, jewelry, whatever it's going to be. I also want to gain experience, so outside of the dungeon, and it doesn't have to necessarily be campaign play, I can buy stuff, I can level up, I can have ownership of my character. I can develop my character. Now, that could be something as simple like we see in Hero Quest, which is all gear related, buy some armor, buy a new sword, buy some potions. Or it could be a little bit more complex, something that we see in systems, even something like the Dungeons and Dragons adventure systems, where you can shop and buy items and level up and spend experience, even though it's simplistic, and I mean that in a good way. It works. I want to feel like I'm making some progress. So I'd like that in a dungeon crawler. The final piece, preference dragon, but if not, that's okay. I want to have some epic fights. I want to have some memorable boss fights along the way. Not necessarily go through these 10 quests and here at the end is the final boss. I mean, that's possible in a campaign. That's usual in a campaign, and that makes sense because the whole idea of a dungeon crawler is RPG type based. I'd like that, whether it's a demon or a dragon or some sort of giant. But it would be cool to fight some lieutenants along the way. It would be cool to fight some mini bosses along the way. And I have to say, the Dungeons and Dragons Adventure Series board games, the later ones like Temple of Elemental Evil, they do a good job of this. No spoilers. You have a story. You have an epic end boss fight, which is hard. But along the way, there's various lieutenants and semi-powerful bosses. So it keeps you fresh. It keeps you going. It provides nice bookends to the various chapters of playing through the game. I really enjoy that. I look forward to that. I think the days of like, here's 10 levels of chopping through minions and then here's a final necromancer, I think we're a little bit more sophisticated than that. I think we're a little bit more beyond that. So those are the elements that I would like to see in a good dungeon crawler. And all of the systems that I have hit on most of these topics or a few of these topics. That's why they're in my collection. But if I was going to pull out one dungeon crawler, and I don't know, I got to think about this for a little bit. We'll circle back around. But I will ask you the question. If you had to pull out, obtain, or play one dungeon crawler, Overland like Runebound and Magic Realm don't count. Although I guess Magic Realm kind of has some dungeons. But if you had to play one dedicated dungeon crawler for a year, that's all you're going to play, what would that title be? And is that a title that I should be looking at?